Hello, friends, and welcome to Module 10 of Focus on Folktales and Traditional Literature. And if I thought putting the poetry module together was difficult, this was 10 times more difficult because there is so much to do with this and it was so hard to narrow down. But again, I did my best. And like I said, if you think you have it bad, this one took me maybe 4 or 5 hours to put together. So, and that doesn't count having to read all your responses. So I'm just saying there is such a big world out there with traditional literature. It's hard to, I just tried to give you a tongue taste, and I hope that you will carry on and continue to dig into this because it's so rich and valuable. So the first thing you'll do is download the document, which I have here. And by the way, if you'll notice, the background is different because I am here in Salt Lake City for the NAME conference, which is the National Association of Multicultural Education. And it is my urging that once you become a teacher, that you join the organization and you get to their conferences because it is so valuable to hear people talk about how do we support the use of multicultural literature and multicultural education in the classroom to support the needs of all the children we are serving. It is an important message, an important group, and I urge you to check into it. Okay, so traditional literature. First, let me just say that even though fairy tales and folk tales are considered children's stories, they were not designed that way. Traditional literature comes from a pre-literate culture, in other words, groups that it was oral tradition before literacy was even a part of humanity. So these were stories told to educate and to enlighten and to teach. So they were not designed for children, they were designed for a group or a tribe. And I think part of our challenge today is there are important messages in them, but when we water them down to make them appropriate for children, we are losing some of those really big, important messages. So just there's my caveat. So the first thing I want you to do is just consider favorite stories you had as a child. Like for me, Hansel and Gretel was a really important story. I could really relate with that and the challenges in that. So I'd like you to go to the Padlet and just kind of write a response. What was a story that was significant to you and why were you impacted? And like last week with poetry, maybe go back to that now that you've, after at the end of this, after you've considered these things, and you might have a deeper understanding about why that was so meaningful to you. So I think I'll have you actually go back and add a response and see if you're how you're thinking about it changes. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was a scholar. He died in the late 80s, I believe. And I think he was in his 90s when he died. But he wrote maybe one of the most famous books about traditional stories, although he wrote a ton of things. But the one that really was big is called A Hero with a Thousand Faces. And Campbell looked at myths and stories from around the world, from all of human history, including religious, and found what are some of these common themes? What do we see over and over and over and over again in all the stories ever designed that tell us about the human experience? So the book is fabulous, and there was a journalist and political commentator who actually worked as a press secretary in the White House for the Johnson administration who interviewed Campbell in this incredible PBS series. We're only going to look at a little clip of it, but if you ever get a chance to watch through it, it's fabulous. Or even better, get the book. I have a copy of the book and I've read a fair amount of it, and it will open up and give you insights into things that you hadn't considered before. So here's a link. There's a little introduction by first Bill Moyers where he's talking after Campbell has died, just about having known Campbell and worked with him for just 2 minutes and a little brief intro. And then there's a clip of him where he's interviewing Joseph Campbell. It's linked together. So the total is, I think, maybe 9 minutes where you get to see Joseph Campbell talking, and they're talking a little bit about the hero with a thousand faces and hero's journey. And I just wanted you to get an intro here and just write down 3 things you learned from the discussion. Then if you go to that link, which I will take you to right now, you'll see posted on the side the person that uploaded this video broke it up into different sections. And you can see on the side here, there are all these other topics that are addressed. So I'd like you to just scroll through and pick one more to watch. I'm going to pause this. No, I said pause. So pick one more of these that you think is of interest to you and watch at least 5 minutes or so. You don't have to watch the entire thing. One that I liked was this number 4, where he's talking about, or number 5, or movies. And in this one, they take us look at Star Wars through the hero's journey and some of the commonalities there. But you're welcome to pick any of these. Okay, so once you've done that, just tell me which one you picked and what things you learned from that one. And here's a copy of one of the editions of his book, Hero with a Thousand Faces. Okay, now one of the things Campbell identified in all of these stories about the hero is what he called the hero's journey. And he identified 17 stages of the hero's journey. And again, if you look at almost any story, especially any popular story, and that can include modern films, romantic comedies, modern books, certainly Harry Potter, certainly The Hunger Games, The Hobbit, all their main characters go through this hero's journey. So this is a short 4-minute video talking about the hero's journey. And what I'd like you to do is consider a story you know, and it could be something from your life or somebody you know's life, some challenge they've had to face and what they had to do to get through it. Or it could be a film or some kind of any other story you want, and walk it through the stages. First do the title and a brief description, and then take us through, okay, here was the status quo, here was life at the beginning, something happened, there was some assistance, they left their usual world and came into this new world of the journey. What are some of the trials and challenges they faced? What was the crisis, the life and death, the rebirth, the resurrection? What did they learn after surviving this or being reborn or relearned? What results and gifts did they have? How did they get back to their world? How is their new life now with this new learning that they have, and how does the story wind up? Okay, now you're going to read the chapter in the book, and you can skim this. I don't need you to study read it in depth, but you'll see that they mention some of these things you've already looked at. But I'd also like you to look at this in terms of putting it into the classroom, because there's a lot of great information in this chapter as well. So just pick at least 6 concepts that are new to you from the chapter to list here, or you can put it in a table format or anything else, but if you want to just list them, that's fine. And that can include some of the tips they have for teaching that you hadn't thought about, so something you might use actually when you're a classroom teacher. And then you're going to look at 3 versions of the same story. So on Blackboard, I've posted an article called Some Pigs, where she looks at multiple versions of the 3 Little Pigs, and I'd like you to pick at least 3 copies of another story, like Snow White, like Cinderella, like Hansel and Gretel. Look at 3 different versions of that and do a similar kind of comparison. At the minimum, you're going to look at the text itself, what language was used, what levels would each book be appropriate for. Are they different? Is one more complex for higher level, or is one more simple for lower? Look at the quality of the illustrations. What would you say about them based on what we've already learned in terms of evaluating illustrations? Looking at the formatting, the font choice, how does that impact the story? How it's laid out, is it a big 2-page spread? Are the words and pictures together? Are they separate? The end pages, paratextual features, all of those things. And then what I'd like you to do is, using a Web 2.0 tool, figure out some way to share this information, and you're going to post a link on a blog. See if you can use a tool that's different than one you've already used. Remember, we have the censorship blog we created, or the chapter presentations from chapter 2 and 3 to get ideas of what tools other people have used, and that way if you need help, maybe you could ask that person to guide you through if you get stuck. So you're going to evaluate at least 3 versions of different stories, and then you'll be able to see each other's evaluations, which will be interesting too. Okay, so make sure by the end of this week that you post your link to the Family Literacy Backpack Tour. So you're going to walk us through your backpack project and the responses you got from a colleague and also from a family that actually used your project. Please share with us too if they did the activities, show us what they did. Then you're going to upload this document to Blackboard and post the link to our blog here. So here's the blog for the link where you're going to post your 3 versions and your response document. As usual, contact me if you have questions. And remember, this week there will be no discussion, nor do you need to do a response about one of the books. Talk to you soon.